We are joined by Tom Tumbleson. Tom Bulson. That's right, isn't it? Am I pronounced that right?
Son of Tom.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works for you, mate. I think Yeah, I don't know. It sounds better when you just go from the beginning. Tumbleson.
Tumbleson, there we go. Right. But I was thinking of Tumbleson.
Tumbleson.
Yeah, no, I was saying it right.
Yeah.
I just, what, is you cute? You know when it's like just
I just
curious.
think he questioned his own name there. That was
Yeah, 1-0 us.
When I apply for a bank account, I get called Tom Bleeson, as in James Bond. And then they think I'm going. No, it's
Well,
Tom.
that's what,
Tom Bumbleson.
Do you remember
Fuck, it's waste some time on that.
Chris Robshaw? He's like, hello, Rob Shaw.
Yes,
I thought his name was
exactly
Rob
the same
Shaw.
issue.
The audio cue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, but that was different. Someone met him and was like, oh yeah, I've met your mate Rob. I'm like, who?
Rob Shaw.
Rob Shaw? It's like, Chris Robshaw. He's like,
Yeah.
is that his name? I'm like, yeah, it's not Robert. No, his name's not Robert Shaw. It's, yeah, right. So, yeah.
I get people laugh. Like I get operators going, "Is that your name?" And they start giggling. I go, "Anyway, nice to meet you." Okay, that was okay. My family, they just got lazy on that one, didn't they?
Well, we know you as TT, legend, GOAT. But yeah, basically, we go back a long time actually, because we go back since we did sevens together, didn't we? England sevens together, me and TT.
Little Len.
And we did Adelaide, didn't we?
Yep.
And what an experience that was.
We didn't come first in that one, did we?
We didn't. And we didn't get the bowl either. What we did get was William Ryder basically humiliating us, Fiji. And then we played USA, wasn't it? And the game had drawn, but we thought we'd lost. Or there was some mess up, wasn't there? So we left the field and then we were all getting our boots off.
I was in an ice bath.
And then Ben Ryan comes in and goes, boys, they've messed up the scoring. Like, it's you got to go back on. It's golden point, isn't it? You do golden point.
That was hard to get my head around that.
We're like slipping on our boots quickly. He's getting out the ice bar, run back on. They kick off. They win their own kick off, move it wide, score, end of the game. It's like brilliant.
They didn't account for the fact they got two English blokes here who only got one set of lungs. Between you and me, there's a one pair of lungs.
Oh my God. Good times though. But you did that. So you had a little spell in rugby, did the sevens, of course. You did play sort of semi-professional rugby as well. Moved to Australia, played at Randwick. You then moved into the Waratahs and S&C, worked under Michael Checker. You then got headhunted by Stuart Lancaster, England, came over to England and been there for a decade, 10 years.
Yeah, I had the unenviable job of succeeding Paul Strigeon.
Yes.
I didn't have quite as much banter, so I had to try and find other ways to add value.
Well, I think, to be fair, mate, you've seen it all, though. Like, so you think you've worked, obviously, Checker, Waratahs, Stuart Lancaster, Eddie Jones, Steve Borthwick. Mate, so you've seen the game evolve. You've seen players change. You've seen plenty of people come in and out of the door. You've seen a few of us remain in the door for a long while.
And come back in.
Yes.
A couple of times.
Out and in, yeah.
And come back in. And but yeah, I suppose let's... I think it's a really fascinating episode because a lot of people don't understand what's done week to week leading up to Saturday and how much of a massive influence S&C is in that in terms of like loading and getting ourselves right to peak on a Saturday. And I think some people, no disrespect them, but sometimes I think they just assume we kind of just go out, play a bit of touch and then lift some weights, rock up on a Saturday and see how we go. Well, there's just so much more to it than that. So I suppose the first question is, TT, apart from how are you, is how do you make a test team peak on a Saturday? How does that start? So, you're 10 years working international rugby. How is it, and how has that changed over the years of getting a team to peak at the weekend?
A lot of it's dictated by the club game and how successful the club game is and how aligned the demands of club rugby and European rugby are to international rugby. Because if there's a big disconnect there, then that process has to start earlier, and it's a bit more of a teething process before you then come into camp. For example, let's just say that not golden era, but that really successful era when we won those consecutive test matches and won Grand Slams, 2016 to 18, Saracens were very strong, weren't they? They were winning European Cups, and club rugby was very strong in England. Their game model, Saracens' game model, wasn't a million miles away from Eddie's philosophy on how we could utilise English strengths. Eddie comes in, he's going to look at the spine of the team and go, I'm going to make sure that complements the way this team can work. And you had Jamie George, you had Marrow, you had Billy and Owen. That's a really good bedrock, isn't it? So the transition there from the Saracens players to format into the England, and then all the other players that complement. That's not as much of a transition to then adapt to the international game as perhaps it was when we had a more challenging period in, say, 2018 post-COVID, when maybe Saracens, not using the Saracens as an example too much, but they were in the Championship, and then that exposure to European rugby wasn't the same for them as it was for it was in the previous years. So the answer to your question is, Lenda, it kind of starts the moment you kick off in round one of the Prem, because you're kind of assessing the ways the club game is going, what the physical and tactical demands are, and what the discrepancy is to what you're expecting the international game is going to be, how that's going to unravel, and what you can use from that and how you can use it to prepare for international campaigns. If you find that the game is changing in club rugby and it's really different to international rugby, thinking, right, we're going to have to start nudging some physical qualities and mindsets to make sure that when they get into camp, you can flick the switch and you're not just being victims of what the lads are used to week. And when I say victims, I say it in the most positive way, it's just different. So there was a period of time, I forget which year, where the ball and play was really high in the Prem. Everyone had a really big attacking focus. They weren't kicking out, they weren't contesting, they were just playing phase. So I can't remember what year it was, but international rugby was going the other way. So that's the art of the coaches, to try and just sow seeds, whether that be in mini camps or just indirect conversations leading into camps, saying, look, you're going to have to start switching over to English rugby mindset at some point. And then that becomes a selection thing. Can I pick players that can change and can flick the switch? I mean, it's not necessarily the best players in the Prem that are going to be the best international players. You've seen that loads of times, haven't you? Yeah. And then the physical differences are going to be quite dramatic as well, especially if you're playing like a high ball and play format in the Prem, and then you go to international rugby where the ball's out of play a lot. You've got short periods, which is really explosive and hard, which is a bit more like gridiron, and then boom, it has like a 4-minute block like in soccer. So you've got to start sowing the seeds early and start nudging, and that's where the club v country agreement is going to be really important now, because England might have a bit more control over any physical stuff leading into camps. But once you get into the camp, it's picking the right people in the first place, making sure they're in good shape, because that's half the battle. Because you can't start to get in shape once you walk into camp. You've got 10 days to your first test. Most of the time it's a week if the guys are battered. So you can see that we've got to get ready for the first game. And if you're not ready, then we should have been earlier. So it's a balance between also that weekend, but then also what's happening in 8 weeks' time. I remember when Eddie came in 2016, we went pretty hard on the conditioning side of things, didn't we? But he had an eye on the last game, and we did enough to beat Scotland round one. But then when we got to the last game against France in Paris, in that Grand Slam game, we had some good wind in our sails and we were ready to go. But that's the art of the coach, I think.
Does that come from, TT, when we arrive, so I'm just thinking of all the times we turned up at camp, so autumn internationals, let's take all 6 nations. We turn up, as you say, 10 days before the first test, right, which is such a short turnaround. How much of it is, okay, we've got this planned, we think the game's going this way, particular way, like the ball in play maybe a little bit higher in test rugby, or for instance, the example you gave, actually, the ball in play was higher in the Prem, and actually not so much, the data wasn't suggesting that. So how much are you led by data in that aspect, and how much are you led by, let's see how the boys pitch up, and not in a way of, let's just see what they pitch up and how they do, but one of your huge strengths is your feel and ability to connect and be a great human with the lads, in my opinion, especially backs, very feel like, okay, how you doing, how you feeling. So how much of it is, okay, data, this says this, but actually Lenny's walked through the room and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, actually, okay, I had this planned, but actually to get him right for next Saturday, I'm gonna have to tweak that.
Yeah. I think that when I've seen coaches do it really well, they've used their feel and they've used the data to back up and add context to it. If you look at the data and you make opinions on people before they come in, that's a risky business that you can get undone, because, like I said, because it's not the same context, you can't just look at it and go, this is my hypothesis. So I remember in again 2016, I sound like a granddad, I remember when the lads first turned up for Eddie's first training session, I remember him turning around to me going, fuck, the boys look pretty good, eh? They look quite fit. And the concept was at that point that in 2015 we were a bag of arse, but we just weren't fit for context. But then we started doing some really contextual rugby training, and the boys actually were pretty good. So you don't want to go into it with any preconceived ideas. You got to look at the lads, the way they train, the way they can adapt. Some lads just step up. Some lads have terrible GPS with their clubs, and they train with England. They know they've got really good game sense, and they just step up. And there's no difference between the club and country, or that everything just goes up a level because they're test match animals. So it's a fool's game to look at the data and say this is how the lads are going to be. You just got to use it as a layer of context, I think.
It makes me feel a bit better that you saying that Eddie turned to you and said after the first training session the boys look all right, because I remember being hounded for being shit.
But that was all a part of the process, wasn't it?
It was.
Exactly.
Bleed plaster, wasn't it?
How slow we were, how we weren't available for international rugby, couldn't do this, weren't fit enough, and like there was a massive blast, wasn't that, the first even month of that Six Nations of literally getting fit, and obviously it tapered off, but it was a shock. I remember those first few sessions were a shock to everyone, because it was like, the intensity we trained with, the amount of running and stuff. It was only short sessions, but
Yeah.
well, it was a short session, but the session was also involved the half-hour warm-up that was fitness, and like the 20-minute afterwards.
And the warm down, which might have been a bit of fitness as well. But
yeah, we're only going to train for 40 minutes, but there is an hour either side of that where you're going to get beaten up. It's like, okay, but like I just remember that and being, that was an eye-opener. But in terms of just for layman terms, what within the demands of international rugby, the physical demands, in terms, say, listeners, there's obviously the collisions, I'd say, of higher impact.
Yeah.
You'd say ball in play is lower, but what's the average meter sort of and accelerations? Is everything? Is it just a more intense? Everything sort of goes up in terms of speed. Obviously, you've got the best player, so collision speed, that kind of stuff. But greater rest periods. But then the ball in play is of higher intensity than say the Premiership.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's sort of a series of sprints rather than.
Let's just say the games broke it down to actions, whether that be a carry, a hit, a ruck. All of those actions are just fifth gear instead of third and fourth. So everyone's just a bit more explosive, a bit more intentful, a bit more desperate, because you've got the best players in the countries, and they're not always the best athletes, but they're either bloody tough or they're really technically accurate. So those actions are brutally intense, and they're very, very, like I just said, accurate. So when you get out that ruck or out that tackle, you're just like, again, I wasn't an international rugby player, but I imagine it's like, it's just a bit more, it takes the wind out your sails, but you still got to do the same amount of running. So there'll be Premiership games where there's more running because of ball in play, but you come out of it in a mini car crash, whereas at the Premier it might have been a go-kart crash. So you're just a little bit more zapped. Your legs are just a little bit more wobbly. Your lungs are just a little bit smaller, but you still got to do the same amount of work off the ball.
I totally agree, because I think there's not really, I can't think of a Prem game where I've played where I've basically been like, lactated up, like ruck to ruck as a 9.
Yeah.
But I can think of a number of occasions in test rugby where you are like, you go in multi-phase and it's just the ball's there and it's got to go and it's so quick. And then all of a sudden you turn it over and the transition for
Boom.
teams that go, like All Blacks obviously brilliant at it, Aussies, France. You drop the ball, so you've chucked the kitchen sink at them. It's gone quick. You drop the ball, boom, 2 pass. They're suddenly making a line bend. You've all got to get back.
You're 100 yards down the field, and
Yeah.
they've made 4 passes where maybe in another world there would have been a down ball, or the ball would have gone into touch.
Yeah, or you knock it on, everyone just stops and takes the scrum, settles for a scrum maybe in the Prem, or they try and shift
they just carry it rather
or they
than
just carry it and shift it.
Yeah.
Or you just don't get there's no let off in Test rugby. There just is no let off ever. I know the ball in plays this, but there's no mental break whilst, like you said, in the periods of actually when the ball is in play. It is beyond intensity that I can kind of describe.
Well, also when you play chess, you use up a lot of brain glucose, like just on decision making and cognitive load. Add that type of cognitive load that's way more demanding in Test match rugby. Add that to the physical component, then actually the stress of the game and the energy cost is pretty high. So you've got to cater into the fact that not only are you physically under stress, but you're under quite a lot of emotional stress and cognitive stress as well. Like emotionally, like these results, this could cost you a career. Like it could influence whether you're going to play the next 5 games of the Six Nations, which is going to have a huge image, financial, reputational cost to you. So those things stress and they weigh, don't they? So if you add that to the physical side, like things just go fucking up quick, don't they?
And the training and all those bits, and you're in camp, so you can never escape it,
No.
That's one thing I would ask actually, whilst we're on that, is, as players, we can go back to our rooms and have the odd breaks and everything like that, but you're still in camp, and it's like you just literally mentioned there, TT, like exactly right. It doesn't ever stop. But from a coaching point of view, you know, we train, you're then reviewing it, you're then prepping what does the team need the next day. You're probably looking at maybe someone's picked up a little niggle. Are they going to be all right? You're having coaches meeting. For you, the intensity of it must be non-stop whilst you're trying to prepare, review, like individual bits, who does he need, wants and needs, all that. Like that just constant.
Yeah, you go on adrenaline in camps, and then like I used to just crash and burn the week after camp. Like I like training, but the week after camp I'd just be sitting like a cauliflower just on the table, like staring into space. It would be like, kids throwing plates across the room, dogs scream, like dogs barking. And Mrs. like, have you not heard that? Like, I didn't hear a thing, sorry. Well, you say that because you're in camp fatigue. No, I'm not. I just didn't hear it. That's what happens. You don't like, you're in a fucking haze.
Honestly, you are. You get home, don't you? You drop your bags and you're just like, and then you go into the club next day and it's like, right, big game this week, boys. It's like, what? Sorry, what?
God,
It's absolutely battered.
I know.
Who we got? Oh, you got a nice home fixture. Yeah, who we
You
got?
got 15 blokes want to rip your head off.
Yeah. No. Sorry, we got Newcastle away. Oh, it's like Friday night. Oh, God. You boys all right for it? Yeah, we're mustard for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Just with your, say, role in, obviously, you're involved in all the coaches' meetings and sort of everything because the team's quite integrated. Does that role evolve from, because some people think the S&C coach just get the boys better, get them stronger and fitter and stuff. How was your role sort of integrated into the decision making of, say, we've got Ben here, what do we need to, the coaches come to you and say we need him physically better, you obviously do that, and how do you integrate into training as well, the demands of the international rugby and the fact that sort of you need to be fast and it's different to the Premiership, so how does your role integrate with training loads? Because the best, like people think, I think sometimes you train and then you do fit, you know what I mean, and then also separate silo you do fitness, but actually the best teams, the training is the fitness, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
no,
absolutely
integrated, because that's one thing my eyes when under Eddie and Steve and stuff like that, is the fact that training was, you didn't need to do fitness because you ran so hard and fast in training. And also, like, how is those demands, obviously you go for numbers and data and that kind of stuff, but integrated into what you do? You know what I mean?
A sport like soccer's done that well for a period of time. And maybe a decade ago, my role would be all of the time off the field, like the gym, making sure recovery was set up, making sure the lads were fit coming into camp. But Eddie was the guy that kind of pioneered, really, I think, greater integration and collaboration amongst all of the multidisciplinary units into the coaching process. Like he had a saying that he'd say to the physios, to the logistics, think like a coach. What can we all do to get the best performance out of these people? And it's not going to be just because they lifted weights or because they did those extra fitness sessions. It's going to be because it all came together. So, like I said about football, Eddie took a big influence from a concept called tactical periodisation, which was basically the total preparation of the team with a bias towards the tactics as the overarching principle of all of the decisions you make around how you plan physical load. And when he came in, we did do some fitness, didn't we? But it was more to do with individualisation and a little bit of bonding and a little bit of messaging. But the really tough stuff came through our tactical games. It would be he could make 15 on 15 really fucking hard, couldn't he?
Oh my God, without doubt.
We would do fitness almost to fatiguers going into that.
Yeah.
So when we went to 15 on 15, the decision making
was more stressful.
You were knackered, but you were stressed, and it was almost harder than rugby in some regards because you're going into pre-fatigued, but you also had to perform in a 15 on 15. I remember doing one in Treviso. Do you remember that game we played, internal semi-game we played after doing fitness and stuff?
Forever sketched in my mind some of those. Even 12v12, right? So you do the thingy. And you're right, mate. He would, and he'd be playing, he'd be running, and it would be testing you, like you say, mentally, physically, like, can I actually hit that ball? And then someone would drop it. He would then shin it, because he loved kicking the ball, didn't he? He'd then be like, turn over, boot it. Not very far, but he'd grab it. And then you'd be like, I'm not sure I can actually get behind this ball now and get there. And he'd push you to absolute, but it made you, at the end of it, you were like, shit, if I can do that.
It's really important there, and that's the art. That's the art of the head coach doing that. That you manipulate the game to be just a little bit more extreme than it is, without distorting it to be unrealistic, where it looks like you're playing the game but you're not. And the players are smart. Like someone like Fordy would be able to say to you, that was just like the game. like tactically we were under that much pressure. The ball in play periods, the sequences were just like the game, but it was just a little bit more demanding. Whereas just having people on the field with a ball, making it really fucking hard, really extreme, you can actually then go the other way and you can have negative transfer and you can go, you know, that felt like it was really hard, but I'm not sure it prepared us for the game. Like, there'll be examples of that.
Oh, mate, plenty. You know, I've had coaches in the past where, like, it's bloody tough, but I can't see any transfer in terms of it. Well, it's so tough that the product of what you're trying to get out and the decision making, all that, it becomes so bad because everyone's so fucked.
Yeah.
That actually is nothing beneficial from it.
But there was a period where we were chasing excels, and I think sometimes the forwards, like in training, because afterwards it was almost like the coach come at you and go, like, your acceleration, it's about your acceleration, how many metres you've done. There was points in kick chase and stuff where we just accelerate between the 10 metre lines and the ball get kicked overhead and we accelerate back. We weren't getting better at rugby, but we were just getting the excels up because that was being judged.
And that's the danger.
And that was almost like we started off one way, then went so far that way, then we sort of pulled it back to where actually you can run, but you've got to integrate that into how you play the game and what you're actually doing rather than just running for the sake of running.
And that's what football do well, because with their GPS reports, they're very much in line with the training reports. So let's just say you've got a pressing team, they're going to accelerate because of their tactics. But you're not looking at the GPS and saying he did 70 excels today. Why? You're looking at it going, he pressed really well today. Let's look at his GPS. Well, he's accelerated correspondingly, as you'd expect. So as long as you're feeding back to the player about what the actions need to be and how many of them you need to do, the GPS, like I said earlier, gives you the context to it. But leading with the GPS is fool's gold, because you'll build a capacity. That's going to happen. But you're going to have a player that maybe doesn't quite still get the game model or doesn't fit in to the tactics. And if you've got someone with really big lungs but isn't actually doing what you want him to do, then he's fucking useless.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about guys fitting to the game model, like one that screams out to me is someone like Johnny May.
Yeah.
Because for that early period under Eddie, you know, we used a big sort of box kicking was important, but Johnny's ability to do repeated efforts and get in the air and get in constant contests, chasing these kicks. Like, I don't think people realise how exhausting that is. This is a highly tuned athlete, but like, I suppose educate them on that, like what it takes for him to be able to do that repeatedly, compared to maybe, let's say, someone's or in the Premiership might be tearing down trees, but he can only do 2 reps and then he's fucked.
Yeah.
And then that's no good. Like, we can't have that. Like,
I would like to say though, when you say people don't realise how exhausting that would be, Johnny would tell them.
Oh yeah, he would. Yeah, no, he would. Yeah.
The Ferrari would get parked on a Tuesday. We're all beating each other up, and he's like, "I'll just do a couple of runs. I'm fatigued from the game." It's like
amazingly self-aware.
Yeah,
amazingly self-aware. Eddie used to tell him, put the Ferrari in the garage, didn't he?
Yeah, that was good tactics by Eddie, because it just added importance, because he was just reinforcing the good stuff he was doing. You know, that is hard work. Like, if you've got high outputs, if you've got a big battery, and you're doing things, you're running 10 meters per second a couple of times a game, which is what Johnny was doing, that your batteries are going to drain pretty quick. So you've got to find ways to try and preserve and be really smart with what you're doing. Because if you're uneconomical and you don't understand the game and you're doing running that you don't need to be doing, you are going to die a quick death. But John's skill was his ability to understand what his role was. Like, he was very good at that. When he was, let's just say 2019, he knew his game, what was required of him, better than anyone, didn't he? And he just committed to it 100%. And when we trained, if we went into some like a tactical game that had some kicking episodes to it, he'd pull his socks up and he'd go balls out into that, because he knew that if he put all of his effort into that, he's training the energy system, the physical requirements that are going to directly transfer to what he needs to do at the weekend. And on the other parts of the week, which might be in some elements S&C or more traditional running, he would just temper the effort, but he would prioritise his effort, and you know, that's smart. Like,
very smart.
He's got a lot of caps, he's scored a lot of tries, he's been very successful. It's just being smart and nuanced with where you put your efforts. And because he was like that, and he was so good at the things that Eddie prioritised in him, Eddie treated him correspondingly. Every now and again, you say, like, you're good here, then, mate. You don't need to do this bit. As long as you fucking do that, you score your tries and chase them kicks. And Johnny, being Johnny, just did it a lot, didn't he? He just did that well, yeah. Yes, master, I'm doing that.
We'll say, it always amazed me, like, you watch the Olympics and you get the 100-metre runners, and they run 100 metres, and it's like, right, I'm going on ice for the next, like, 2, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing this, and you've run 100, I know you've warmed up and stuff, but I'm not saying we run 100 metres every time, but someone like John is, The wingers in the system England play is like you're 100%. 100%. Every kick sprint is 100%, or every time the ball's in behind, or you're running back. It's you are literally everything you do is as fast as you can do it, and that ability to recover and do it and repeat it, and it is going to be draining and it is fatiguing. But the fact that you're almost sprinting like that, but continually, it's tough, isn't it? Like,
and also in attack, you're never on the wing. Very rarely wingers. I know it sounds crazy, but you're around the ball. You're chasing inside balls off 9. You're chasing shoulder balls off 9. Suddenly you're popping up outside 40 and Faz, and you're getting out the back of shape. Then you're on your wing maybe for 2 phases. Then you're back in again looking for support lines. Someone makes a line break, you're expected to be there. So it doesn't just stop there. It's constant.
It comes back to the point about I think the difference between Premiership and international rugby is like if Johnny May, say, or the winger doesn't chase 100% on, you don't know which one is going to turn the game until you don't run. And as soon as you don't run and they get the ball and they pass the ball, they score, you lose it. Whereas like you've got every kick chase you do, every kick sprint's got to be flat out. In the Premiership, you can probably get away with running at 85%, or the margin's a bit bigger. Whereas the international rugby, if you don't run 100% or you don't get to the ball or win it in the air or make it a shit fight, the team scores and you lose the game. And that's that ability. I think John's was exceptional at it, is the fact that everything he did was 100%.
Yeah,
because it had to be, because the one you didn't run 100% on could turn the game.
They stand out like dog don't they? If the opposing winger fumbles a box kick and he's there to pick it up and he's off, that could win the game. Look right there. If he gets in his visual field and he makes him fumble, he's never going to get into the contestable battle, but he just spooks the guy a little bit. That could influence the game. And there'll be thousands of times at Twickenham where the tide has turned in momentum because of a little thing like that, and then we're on top of a team and we used to play on top of them on the back of that. That was Johnny, or that was Ant, or that was or Jack.
The box kick.
And the kick.
And that as well.
Of course. But
on the platform, the forward set up.
At the scrum, the set piece, yes.
Well, yeah, just touching the breakdown to go, play away now.
The tie had buckled their loose head. Who was that?
Big guy. Yeah, big guy. The big guy over there. But the example of that is, for listeners, is that we played Australia at Twickenham one year, and Australia like coming at us. They're going phase, and it's a bit wet. Anyway, and they're going through the phase. Anyway, I think Karevi carries and he spills it.
Yeah.
Right, land literally bobbles in front of me. I pick it up, like we're under pressure. So I boot this ball, and it's gone over halfway, and it's bouncing, and it's heading to touch. Like it's going to roll out. It's going to roll out. Right. So Curtly Bill's running across. I think someone else is running across. Elliot Daly, hell for leather, chasing it, because we valued that at England.
Yeah.
Like we did that repeatedly in this 12v12, in this repetitive like game scenario of chase and turn him and pin him and all that. So I've kicked this ball. Everyone thinks it's going out. Everyone. But Elliot has not broke stride.
Blade of grass difference.
Blade of grass. Curtly Bill just slows up just because he thinks it's going out.
Yeah.
Whoever else was, I think might have been Corabetti coming across. He slowed up. They're both stopped. Elliot hasn't. Blade of grass, boom. He hacks it with his left foot. They've all stopped. Run, score. We win the game. Well, and like that is for listeners, that's a perfect example of the margin of Test rugby, because it is minute.
On the other side, I don't think Elliot scored that try. I think JJ did, didn't he? And then I think Elliot ran like 120 metres or something.
Yeah.
And then JJ's on his shoulder because he also didn't give up.
I think you're right. Yeah, you're right.
And I'm thinking like, well, in another world, that JJ's not there. Elliot gets tackled a metre before the line, and then suddenly it still came on. But that finished the game, didn't it?
It did. But that's come off the back of all the training that you've done and organised, and of just this.
Those kicks that Eddie used to put in behind.
But
that was the mad.
But it is because, like you say, Carl, you don't know when that's going to win you or cost you the game.
Well, that ball bowls into touch. No one knows any wiser, but you don't know until
it happens.
It doesn't bobble into touch. You kick it, and that's some of like the learning, I think, for young players. And I remember in the World Cup recently, or the recent 2023, we had it was in one of the wingers was chasing, and it's like they almost gave up, and it's like, would you have got there? It's like, I don't know. It's like, well, if you run hard 100%, you'll get there and you'll know. It's a yes or no decision.
That was the Argentina against Wales, didn't it?
Yeah.
They scored the try on the dead ball at the end.
But it's like yes or no, you'll know. If you run as hard as you can and flat out, you'll get there or you won't.
Yeah.
Whereas if you pull up,
we'll never know.
We'll never know. So just everything you do, go 100%, then it's definitive, rather than I may have, I may not have, and then
why do people pull up? It's because there's that little demon in their mind going, "Fuck, if this is still in play, I'm not sure I've got the next phase in me." Which means being physically prepared, coming into camp, and then the way those games format. So you've experienced them. you go into a game where you're thinking, I'm ready for this. I'm ready for if that happens. I've got the lungs, but I've also got the mindset.
But so that fits into, like, even with forwards and stuff, it's like, if the ball turns over, if we sprint to position as quick as possible or tackle the bloke with the ball there, it's tough, it's hard, but it saves you then having to defend 30 phases, which is then tougher, or conceding, going behind, and dig yourself out a hole. And it's all those, it's the mental battle as much as anything sometimes. It's that ability to go, I need to work, I'm struggling, but if I just put in 3 yards of effort or 2 yards, whatever it is, and dive on that ball, it kills the game, we get a break, rather than, I can't run, they've picked it up, they've gone the distance, and you know what I mean? It's all those bits and bobs.
The mental fitness that's test match rugby and tea. Plenty of times lads are coming to camp with low, quote unquote, low GPS numbers. First game you're thinking, he hasn't got the chronic load to handle this, and boom, they knock it out of the park. How many times has Jack Nowell come into camp with a niggle or training load restricted? He plays the first game, and just because he's a tough mother, he just performed the hell out of himself, didn't he? And he did exactly what was asked of him.
It's the mind, isn't it?
It's so much mind.
And some people literally do have it, or they don't. They just can't break that mental barrier.
Yeah, you would have seen that. You can literally bucket people, can't you?
Yeah,
Test match animals or not.
Obviously, the try that we just spoke about, and having worked with Australian players, like, is there a different, not mindset, or like how do they value the game or see the game, or that physical or running capacity? You know, having worked with Super Rugby, was that something also that Eddie brought over and actually made us better runners, or what? I don't quite know what I'm trying to ask here.
No, I know what you mean. I'll answer it, even if it's the wrong question.
You just go. You know what I mean. We've got that connection.
So Eddie comes into a team and a culture that's embedded in structure, set piece, and defence. You know, historically, and he brings in unstructured training, which is an Australian type of DNA, without being too general, and he adds this unstructured focus to our training that maybe we didn't have. So all of his game model at the time was very much dependent on a strong set piece, scrum, line out, and an aggressive defence, which is why he bought Guzzi and that ticked that box. But then he bought this appreciation of the unstructured part of the game, which might only be 30% of the game, that, like I said, we hadn't concentrated on a lot in the past, or if we had, wasn't as specific as it could have been. It was like more 3D games as opposed to actually playing 15 on 15, but with a lot of unstructured or transition or ball in play periods that were a little bit chaotic. He brought that in, and that was a really nice complement to the traditional English bedrocks. And I can think of loads of tries where suddenly we were winning those types of Australia episode battles, where in the past we're definitely not winning them, but we might get a pushover, we might get a line out strike. But then we were scoring some unstructured tries. Like, hang on, this is a different tool in the box that we've not seen before. So he added like another strength, I think, another string to the bow.
And then with working with he absolutely did. But then working with the Waratahs and that Australian mindset, you know, they maybe don't have the set piece or renowned for having the set piece and all that, but then they naturally have this unbelievable awareness of unstructured and like transition and all that. I suppose it's just interesting, the difference between both nations.
And that might just be cultural and environmental. Like when I worked in Australia, I don't remember ever not being able to train because of weather. Like the decks were always like, compared to what we've got, bowling greens. So you're going to play with the ball. They want to use the ball. That's why you're competing against sports like AFL and rugby league, where kids, if they're not having fun playing with the ball, they're just going to go to another sport. So culturally, it's an exciting. It should be a fast game. And they kind of got that in their locker. But then on the flip side, you could argue that maybe there's parts of their culture that don't suit international rugby, like in years gone by, a lack of focus on the scrum or a lack of focus on structure. And I'm generalising, and it's obviously not like that for everyone, because Australia, the Wallabies have been very successful for a number of years. But that Southern Hemisphere influence was it was good timing for England at that point, wasn't it? And Eddie's influenced that on that side of things, and his appreciation of the English strengths. I think it just had a good combination for us at that point. It brought everything together, didn't it?
So I actually have a question from Ashley, one of our listeners. He says,
Ashley,
how different is S&C for forwards and backs? And I guess that's not just, say, weights-wise, it's probably the structure of the week. If we go a bit deeper into the structure of the week and what you're trying to achieve with different, the forwards and the backs.
Yeah, well, I think they're almost becoming two different sports now. Like a front rower, they play a very different game to a winger. And in years gone by, it's just become more and more specialised. But they still have the tenets. They got to carry, tackle, hit a ruck, pass the ball, some more than others. But the point being, it's kind of, there's a fork in the road now where the demands of the set piece, especially, like, you guys can't scrum on a Monday. You shouldn't have to. So you've got to think carefully where your input into players versus where you're trying, what you're expecting to get out of them, and where they are on the recovery curve from the game. The same thing with the backs. Their high-speed running have gone through the roof now. The way that the kicking game is in international rugby, they're proper greyhounds on the wings now. They got to chase, and they got to chase fast. So guys are going to pull up sore. A winger's going to pull up sore in a different way than a tighted prop is. So their S&C, their recovery, their management of their units especially, because that's where you can be a bit more bespoke with what they do, that's going to be completely different. So you're starting to get now S&Cs that are specialists in forwards physical preparation and S&Cs that specialise in backs physical preparation. That might be they've got a track and field nuance because of the running demands of the game, whereas the front row guys, they might have a bit more of appreciation around the contact elements, the combative elements, being very strong and explosive, but being able to get off the floor. We've used grappling, we've used MMA influences in the past with our Type 5. Getting off the deck, we used to have a back in the game off the deck type of metric, didn't we? There's tactics and there's skills to that big guys who are 6 like Courtney, like, you got to do that differently to how you do it, Len.
Yeah.
So we used to like adopt tactics that would help Courtney get back in the game quicker. Does he take a knee or does he sprawl? And that's different to a winger. So there's a lot of branches and a lot of things weeds you can go into that mean you can't prepare those people too similar. Well, you just can't. But there are things that are still the same, like just the general actions of rugby. They're still going to train together on a Tuesday. But the S&C should be different. It should be different because if you deconstruct the game model, the boffins call it reverse engineering, you look at the requirements of a front row, what are the physical qualities they need in order to scrum, to repeatedly get off the line, to hit around the ruck, to carry, their movement patterns versus the ones out wide. And they're different, which means they should be doing different physical prep. There will be some similarities. They might do some general strength training, but their movement prep before training is going to be different. The type of strength training they're going to be doing is different. The way they recover should be different. So it branches off and it gets more and more bespoke each year, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I say from my point of view, S&C wise, especially when it comes to like weightlifting and stuff, I think like Type 5, we scrummage during the week, which is pretty much a full body, it's a 1 rep max several times, and say line up lifting and stuff is like explosive movements. So yes, we lift weights, but sometimes we get the stimulus through the training we do. Whereas I guess with a winger or something, yes, you run fast, but actually there might be needs to actually lift in the gym because you're not getting the explosive squat, deadlift, those kind of movements, whatever it is, in the game training. Might do a couple of clear outs occasionally, but forwards you're generally working at sort of 100% intensity in the explosive actions, whereas backs aren't. So there's that difference. You know what I mean?
And your training age, that would be dictated by your training age, Corey. Like you would need to do 2 sets of your squat on a Tuesday, your front squat. Whereas a developing front row, there's still a long-term plan in place for this guy where he might just need to do a little bit more, just take a little bit more, train at a bit more of a high threshold than he's used to. He might play less minutes as well. So then the training age, playing history, development curve, that's going to influence that as well. So you're going to have differences within positional groups as well as unit groups.
I loved how individual, like, my program was to a degree, especially from the back end of my time internationally. It was very much like you just knew what I needed, and you knew that, like, okay, so your speed can drop off the older you get. So I knew I needed to do reactive stuff and do all that.
Yeah.
But I loved how individual it became, and I think it had to. The days of actually you all rock up and here's your programs, you all got the same, so pair up, and like long gone. It's not how it should be. Like you say, TT, there are still things that remain the same, and that is if you make the gym competitive. Oh, my gosh, yeah. we all can't help ourselves.
Out.
We can't help ourselves.
Well, it's a great way of driving intent straight off the bat, and it's quite often because you're just driving intent. You're just doing it for a bit of energy. Like you've trained in the morning, you just need a little bit of a spark up. I'm going to do 3 sits here. We're going to put up a leaderboard on this exercise to see who's king of the gym for that day, and you're just creating a bit of a mood. where you're thinking this is not going to cost a lot if he does 3 sets here, but it's going to create a bit of a vibe, and then they can dive into their individual stuff. On the flip side, though, some guys just keep going back. I'm going to beat this score. I'm like, oh my God, I've created a monster here. Like some guys, will just get that bar up however they can because they want to beat someone. Like Brownie was like that. Slady's like that. No matter what, I am going to beat this guy. Like, right, this is not the point anymore. We've got to move on. But they're so they're so competitive, and in many ways, it's like you got to pick your poison because. You don't want them to be absolutely zapped because they're in a competition. Like I remember someone getting injured before South Africa doing jump squats on a leaderboard, and I was like, this was not the fucking point. This was not the point. But the mood was great. We lost to that guy. He's not going to be on the plane.
The boys are buzzing though.
The boys. Yeah, Lenny liked it. We're going back to your other point, Len. You've always had really strong legs, haven't you? You have.
Thank
it takes 2 weeks for you to get back to the levels that are pretty bloody good. Do you need to be doing that every week? No, absolutely not. You just need to do the things that are going to get you right for the weekend while making sure that you're still preserving the qualities that keep you at that level. So I think sometimes SSCs can get a bit too lost on the heuristics of our industry and making sure they keep a double body weight squat or he's still getting his bench in. Yeah, but if you're 33 and you've got a really, really long refractory curve, what I mean by that is that you stay in shape because the amount of time you've been doing it. You don't need to get hung up on that. It's way more important you leave the gym with energy, feeling better than you did before you got in there, so that when you train tomorrow, you're a better version of yourself than if you just trained and crushed yourself with a big back squat. That's what international rugby is about. It's basically performances, freshness minus fatigue. You've got to get that really tight balance between feeling like you've got the work done, but it's not taking anything away. And there's not a lot of science that can tell you if that's exactly right. It's the lads will tell you.
Yeah, I love it. Exactly right. It would, and you'd be able to. Well, you can just tell because they'll just say, "Yeah, I can't do that."
And every squad's got a barometer. Guys that you just talk to, going, "How's the mood? How are the boys feeling?" "Oh, mate, we're buzzing," or "Mate, I reckon watch today, but you might see this." "Okay, good." And they're the guys you trust, and you two were like that, and Fordy was like that, and the guys that you know forever, the guys that you trust their opinion on, the test match animals. Like the wellness scores aren't going to tell you that.
You called us test match animals, Carly.
I'm just wondering about your gym.
Well, you've got 1,000 caps between you. You definitely are.
Wondering about your gym program, Len. When you said it was individualised to you and you didn't used to do any lower limb, were you just on the watt bike? Were you?
Me and TC, we did a lot of hypoxic training, swimming, didn't we? We did a lot of that.
Yeah, we did.
Did a lot of boxing.
Yeah.
Not renowned for a decent punch myself. Not renowned at all.
Mate, I got a chipped tooth that tells me otherwise.
Did I slip one? Did I?
Yeah, that was at the Lensby during lockdown.
Yeah,
I took my mask off. God forbid.
Oh yeah.
No, I got a black tooth.
But we did a lot of that though as well. So we'd try and do obviously running. So for instance, I can't think off the top of my head some of the meters I'd have done. You'd know better than me in terms of meters per second, meters per minute. I'd have done in test matches. I remember France one year, I was sort of around the 140, I think, or 130, something like that.
On an average, yeah. But then you'd have a 1 minute period, Len, when you might have to go to 220.
Yeah.
Like the most, from what my records say, a 9 would have to run in 1 minute of play, might be 220.
Yeah.
Which is just a crazy bout of rugby, like a mad minute.
Yeah. So, but for listeners, that is 1 minute, you've got to do 220 metres, basically.
But there's going to be accelerations in there.
Stop-start acceleration.
You've probably got
turns.
3 passes. You might have a ruck and a tackle.
Yeah.
It's stop-start. It's not just running 2 laps of the pitch.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, God, no. But I think absolutely. And I think the thing is as well, to get to that level of fitness, you can't always do it on feet. To get to that level of what I needed to test match, you can't always do that on the grass. So we used to do loads of different ways of creative ways, and you'd come up with it. And actually, it was really engaging because, I don't mind. There's a time and place to run and on the grass and do all that, but you can't do that every time because it's going to take my load out before a Saturday game, and you have to be clever and smart about other ways of doing it, and you're always brilliant at and also engaging because you're kind of like, okay, that actually was bloody hard. Hypoxic training's hard work.
Oh God, yeah.
Like minging, and it makes you feel awful, but it doesn't really take anything out of you physically as such. An hour later you feel good.
Especially if you're older. Like what you can't do is destroy joints and then go, well, his lungs are fitter. Like that's not going to help him move. We remember then before 2019 World Cup, we used to do these activation circuits. You used to have this big blue thing in your mouth with.
Oh, yeah.
You had a water bag with tweets. Like you do circuits with a bag, just performing functional movements in like a Tabata type style that was give you a massive heart rate response. But you hadn't done any running, but it was simulating going from high to low, low to high, moving laterally, which is a big part of your game. GPS units would say that you've done absolutely nothing, but the heart rate response would tell you that you did some serious work.
That's right.
In changing your body height, changing the angles of movement around a small space. And again, it's just finding tools. And we used swimming, we used hypoxic training, breath holding, anything we could, couldn't we?
We did. And I found it unbelievable. I found it really, like I said, when we talk about individual plans, like that for me is, for the listeners, that's it in a nutshell. Now, what worked for me wouldn't necessarily work for Coley. What worked for me wouldn't necessarily work for Danny Kerr, let's say, who also plays 9, of course. So it's just that individual plan is Ashley's question.
His Gary Jack wouldn't like that, would it?
No, DC's back, mate. When we used to run shuttles and stuff, his back, bless him, he'd be so arched by the end, wouldn't he? Bless him, he could
Poor
never
bugger,
do it.
So with the, is that what you're doing, say, outside of camp when you're not with England? You're outside researching, thinking what works for the individual players, what works in general terms, and then from that, is that your experience of the players where you can narrow it down into? Because I think there's so much in S&C now. If you were to go on, like, say, social media or read a report or anything like that, there's probably stuff that tells you to do a million things, stuff that tells you to do nothing, and you can basically find out. I would say you could probably back the facts up to your own opinion, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So how do you go about sort of reading stuff? And it's your own, I guess, at the team you work in, you sort of go, interesting, yes, no, that'll work for us, bring it in, throw it out. Because I guess you're also under pressure from like Steve or Eddie or Stu Lancaster at time to go, I need these players better.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah.
What can you change from this camp to next to make them better? How are you going to evolve it? What are you going to do? So how did you go about, is that the periods outside of camp where you can go visit teams, focus, read, you know what I mean? How do you, because you're not just in camp, what I'm trying to say is a long way around. Your job isn't just training people in camp. When you're outside of camp for long periods, a couple of months, you're actively going out, researching, bettering yourself, trying to better the team, aren't you? Yeah,
that would be like another pillar of the job. So apart from in camp, and then the out of camp management of like the club visits and just keeping the monitoring process and relationships going with clubs. The third pillar, if you want, is the continuing professional development and finding ways that can create an edge. So that's a benefit of international rugby. You have periods where you can do that. Now, the art of that is to make sure that your focus doesn't get conflicted or distorted through bright lights or methodologies or attractive little things and bits and bobs around the world that seduce you and don't get you off track. So, for example, as long as you've got a clear purpose about what you need to do, it gives you direction in where you need to go. I don't envy an S&C coach these days. The amount of info, the amount of charlatans and the amount of people on the web that advertise this and that, and you don't quite know if what they're saying is true, but you're thinking, I need to make a difference quick, I'm going to invest in that. And then you do it without its backing, and it works or it doesn't work. Like, it's chaos out there. Like, there's so much knowledge and so much information. How can you decipher as a young coach what is meaningful and what's not? It would be terrible. So an older, more discerning eye can perhaps question that and use your network to see, did you get results from that? Is there anything in that? And that's, if you've been in the job a while, you might have a network of people that you can call up and go, do you reckon there's anything in this physiologically? Actually, yeah, like there's nothing published on it, but we're seeing in this environment, there's some kudos here. Okay, you go into it a little bit more, but if you're a young coach, you don't have that network of people that you can bounce and soundboard off, then you're looking at what someone said's worked and you just jumped into it and you spent a load of money and time on it. It's dangerous. So as long as you veto it and you really, really critique it and you red team it and use devil's advocacy and you find out if it really is what it says it is, then you jump in and two-footed. And at the end of the day, it's got to relate to the things you're working on. So we had a big project of making sure that the back's high-speed running capacity could go up so they could relentlessly chase kicks, put pressure on opposition teams and turn the ball over. So, right, well, where can we go now which is going to give them a leg up so we can build the capacity for these guys to do this all the time? There's track and field, but the way they run isn't the same as rugby. But there's things they do to prepare the Achilles, the calves, the hip flexors that equip them for being able to do running at high intensity speeds a lot without being exactly technically the same. So I ended up going to Arizona and going to the World Athletics Center for a couple of gurus about how they recover, really, really thoroughbred fast twitch athletes. Now, we're not doing the same training, but we can take some things from their recovery. I know, Carly, what you're thinking.
Right.
We did do that with you.
Yeah, I know.
But then you just take those things, but then you don't do all of it. You're not going to go and give them the same running sessions that they did, but there might be something in there that the way they train speed endurance that can be added or just tweaked to your environment. So as long as you don't cut and paste, you just keep on going back to your first principles, which is the game model.
Because that's also, I would say, one of the challenges of being, for you guys, in and out of camp or being in and out of camp is in a club environment, you can kind of drip feed something in slowly. So you see something maybe bounds or something,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, or running upstairs with weights on your back. That kind of stuff. You can drip it in slowly in an
Yeah.
club scene because you've got
Yeah.
all year to do it. But we'll say international scene is that ability to go bring a new stimulus to guys that haven't done it, and then someone's Achilles flares up or someone's back flares up or stuff like that because it's new stimulus. And how would you actually, although it might be really good, it's that ability to gradually introduce it without detracting from the weekend, because obviously you've got to play at the weekend, and it's that balance of finding stuff that boys improves them,
Yeah.
but at the same time mentally they don't go, oh no, this hurts, you know what I mean? And that's I guess the art form that you find with experience and
Do no
knowing
harm.
your players and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Because you want the lad. I always wanted the lads to come in and go, I feel like they're gonna get a service that's had thought put into it. Like, you've had 6 months, TT, to get this autumn really good. I fucking better see it. And like, that's what you deserve. That's what the lads deserve. Like, you have that time off. You better bring your A game. You can't just rock out the same stuff you did on the summer tour because it were a different stage of year. They're expecting you to have brought something new. And I was I've always very aware of that responsibility, to feel like they knew that I was covering all bases. So with that, Coley, you want to bring a little bit of vavavoom, but again, do no harm. So the volumes might be small. You might have asked them to reintegrate a little bit of that work in the 2 weeks leading into camp, so that when they come into our sessions, they've got a little bit of that already in their bank. So depending on the clubs and the players, that would be the tactic. But again, you just talk to them and you just do little volumes and you speak to them after every set and you ask them how it was afterwards and they go, I like that. Can we do a bit more of that? Or, no, mate, my Achilles is raging hot. I'm not doing that again. And you don't go, no, we need to keep, no, go, understood. We'll find another way.
TT, we've got some questions basically around rugby players you've worked with, and we'll kind of do it in like a quick fiery manner because I'm sure there's bits and bobs. We could argue the toss for weeks, but
I can do quick fire.
okay, not too quick fire though. We've got a podcast to record, mate.
That's what she said.
Okay. Who's the strongest rugby player you've worked with?
So it depends, but Jim's strong. Marla's very strong, isn't he? Kieran Brooks he was super strong.
Powerful, wasn't
Very. Will Stewart. Coley has got a very impressive front squat.
Very impressive.
Good depth.
Yeah, it's hamstrings, touches, laces. Big depth, good posture. And he has a still face, so it doesn't, good posture.
I could be lifting 60 kilos or 600 kilos, but you wouldn't know, would you?
There's a famous saying in powerlifting, your first rep needs to look like your max, and your max needs to look like your first rep. Coley embodied that.
Oh, I love that's what a compliment. Also, I'm amazed, when you front squat, how your back doesn't go into spasm. As soon as I go into a front squat, like this, I immediately lean forward and like teach my snaps. I'm like, oh my God, my back's going to go into spasm.
Yeah, I'll go down a bad road if I do that. I used to better do that fine, not so more.
So Jim Strong, who are you going for?
I'd say Marla. It's got to be Marla, isn't it?
Yeah, he's so strong.
Genji's up there. Genji's powerful, isn't he, I suppose, yeah.
Well, Marla's a bit lighter as well. And again, technically, Genji's great. Like, he squats like a Buddha.
Rugby strong, then. Because there is a difference.
Dicky.
Yeah.
Like
Luke Hound-Dickey.
Yeah. Like, my grandma could squat more, but he is strong and tough, animalistic. Dicky. He's the first one that comes to mind. Courts, obviously.
Yeah.
Like Luds. Like animal. Like, it just brings all of the rage from the heavens, isn't it, into each contest, and that's strength. Brownie, like strong. Like, these guys are they're functionally really, really fit for purpose. And you don't see these guys ever get smoked, do you? Zach Mercer, he just rides tackles and he's strong for what he does. If we're talking about Jim Strong, then they're often not the same thing.
Who are the most powerful, like, let's say pound for pound then? Because obviously the forwards you mentioned a lot there. Pound for pound, I guess, is one of the backs. Who would you say is the probably strongest in
Pound for
that
pound.
regard?
Well, backs. I mean, forwards. Let's just say it's probably Ben Earl. You know, very, very. You know, he's not super heavy, but he's very
He's
powerful.
got very short limbs, isn't he? So he can.
Yeah, he has. But I mean, his legs, like he can jump. He jumps like Zebedee, and he's very fast. Pound for pound power, like Johnny. Was very like when he jumps, like he just sits up there for a little while, then he comes down, doesn't he? Adam Radwan, Henry Arundel, like they are top 2 percentile, like in any sport. Very, very powerful.
When you work with those guys, right? Do you like just think just don't fuck it up in regards to you've got such great genetics and athletes? You just kind of like just get them to the start line.
That is exactly.
Or do you kind of go, I did that? Could you?
You can do that.
Week 1 of camp, mate. Could you just not jump as high? And then week 3 after
about
the
the-
training program, jump a bit higher.
Are you talking about the Dean Benton effect, where basically they're really quick already, and he's like, how good does he look?
I'm going to test
No,
this.
Dean, he's naturally unbelievable, and you have nothing to do with it because you only met them 24 hours ago.
The SSC community is a harsh world. If you try and claim some of that stuff, you're getting taken down.
Yeah, and I've just taken him down.
You could test them after fitness and then go, look what happened in 8 weeks.
That's the old timer.
Yeah, now we're testing them after a week off.
Finished. Beep.
There's that
Impressive.
tactic as well. Michael Checker said to me once when I was working with him in Australia, we had Israel Folau come from AFL, and he'd lost a bit of weight and he'd had injuries from when he was in AFL. And I remember him saying to me, he said something to me like, "This guy's a thoroughbred, mate. All you can do is fuck him up." And I had all these plans about how I was going to back squat him and I was going to jump in. I thought, yeah, I'm just going to keep him healthy. Like, if he stays healthy, his genetics will just take him through. And he just put weight on and he got stronger and he got faster and he got used to the game. And all I did was go in with a mindset of, but like what I said to you before, he's going to leave the gym feeling better than he did beforehand. I'm not going to crush him. And his family tree got him to the start point. I just didn't want to fuck him up. Same thing with those guys. They've come into your environment with a brilliant nervous system. I can fuck that up by trying to stamp my mark on them. Just keep them healthy so they can do what they need to do.
Love that. Who's the fastest rugby player?
So if you're talking linear straight speed, Adam Radwan and Henry Arundel are lightning. If you're talking fastest moving, that might be stepping, ovation, like Ant. Like,
phenomenal.
He can do like a kipper in a phone box, can't he? Like crazy feet. JJ could move laterally like a super crab. Jack, like these guys can just move. They're fast, but they're not in traditional fast, but they just move fast. So agility-wise, those guys, the top speed guys are your thoroughbreds like your Johnny Arundel and your Adam Radwan.
Which rugby player can run the furthest? So I guess who's probably the fittest in regards to, we'd say like a bleep test, because I guess some blokes would fall apart, wouldn't they? But you do a bleep test. What was the other one we did in 2015?
Bronco, bleep.
That kind of stuff, yeah.
Fittest guys, I remember Richard Wiggsworth when he was a player, Alex Good and Chris Ashton, they had big lungs, big pair of lungs, backs. Forwards-wise, Callum Clark and Tom Wood, they could run all day. They had really big yo-yo scores, which is what we're using at the time, big engines. Those guys would run loads, but again, like Slady's got a huge engine. He can just run and run and run. He just doesn't slow down. Outside of that, it tends to be the halfbacks, doesn't it then?
Faz always used to impress me.
Faz was very good at running.
Watching me in games, didn't you? In like
Yeah.
kick sprint, sometimes we moved 12 over the kick sprint and stuff. You just 79th minute of the game, you just be eating the yards up.
Faz just didn't slow down.
No,
He just did not slow down.
He just kept the
Still
same
doesn't.
pace the whole way through. So let's say we're doing running blocks.
Yeah.
Like people might beat him the first couple of reps, but he just kept the same pace. And by the end, those guys would then just fall behind him, and he just consistently banged them out.
Yeah, he just didn't have any decrement at all. I mean, George is the same. He's
Yeah.
exceptionally fit. Yeah, I'd say those guys. I mean, there's more, and I'm doing a disservice not bringing them, but there's guys. The guys are fit, man. Like especially the backs, they do some serious meters these days.
What I was thinking then, TT, is it's strange though, because we can do running blocks, right? And again, like some guys are phenomenal at those, and some guys that I always struggled like running blocks and that. But then when I got in a game, I never felt Like, do you know what I mean? And DC's back would always go. He'd go. So some of us would struggle in necessarily the running blocks segments, but then equally when you play the game, actually we're absolutely fine.
Loads of examples.
And it's bizarre, isn't it? Like
Joe Launchbury had a terrible yo-yo, but that guy put some serious outputs. Like, he broke records for years. Launches, just how many rucks, how many tackles. Like he covered an amazing amount of ground for a real big guy. Launches. So it's again, that's another thing about where if you use those statistics to try and tell you how someone's, predict how they're going to be, fool's gold. It's a layer, which is a couple of layers underneath the game. What the game's going to tell you.
Absolutely. Which rugby players can squat the most?
Squat the most. It would be those guys I mentioned. It would be your Will Stewarts and your Joe Marlers. And Kieran Brooks again was a super squatter.
If we're talking about a 1 rep max, what do you reckon those guys get up to?
I've seen a video of Kieran Brooks doing 300 kilos. Marlers like easily sort of 250, 260. And I mean, Will Stewart uses a different type of squat with a safety bar squat, and he's got up to like the point where those red discs have hit the end of the bar. When I remember once looking at that going, fuck that, let's go on to power. He doesn't need to be doing that anymore. That's just too scary. I can't spot that. No one can.
We're all going to get crushed if we try and spot that.
Yeah, he can stand up, yet the 4 people spotting him can't lift the weight. like those guys, it's the front rows, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be.
Which rugby player can bench the most?
Same as the same.
Perfect. Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah, Marler.
Marler's so deep though, isn't he? He's so deep, and we had him on the pod, and we were laughing about his hunch and his deepness. But actually, you're right. The depth he needs, it just before it actually hits the barrel, like it's.
And it doesn't. When he's got long arms as well.
Yeah.
Like the people with the short arms, they're the ones that are good for benching, aren't they?
Yeah, he loves it though, Marler. Christ.
But we've had guys like Ben Abano and Gerald Ford Robinson. They were big benchers. Like we've had guys come in and out that had displayed huge displays of strength, like some big numbers. Like
there are some freaks in rugby, aren't there?
Yeah, like really are. Yeah.
In Olympics, we'll go through some Olympic sports, and you just give us the first
Yeah.
name that comes into your mind that isn't Ben Youngs or Dan Cole
Okay. Oh,
for who'd win gold in the 100 metres.
Adam Radwan, I think.
Lovely shot put.
I'd say Marler's arms. It's got to be Marler, isn't it?
What about the decathlon?
Decathlon.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to pretend I know what events are in the decathlon, but I'd say an all-rounder like Ekin Elliott, I reckon will be good on that. Skilled, good physique, good athlete, Elliott.
I was thinking
Daly.
I was thinking Elliot Daly.
Yeah.
I was thinking Henry Slade. I was thinking like
Slade.
George Ford, those type of guys, and
All-round
that.
sportsman, yeah. The pommel horse? I'll do that one, Ben.
Yeah, I just looked at it then. I was like,
Pommel horse?
no, I didn't know I was. Yeah,
I'm guessing gymnastics.
I mean, Johnny's very flexible, but I think he'd need a few years to train up to that. I'm just thinking like someone like a JVP, someone that's
Harry Randall. Like that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure he's got the leg length to cover the pommel horse. Oh, sorry, Rands. But I'm thinking JVP. He's used to being low. He's got longer legs. Someone like a JVP.
400 meters.
400 metres, Fred Stewart. He's got that build and he doesn't fatigue. But he's still fast enough to be fast on the
I'm going
400
to say
metres.
mono-paced. He'd set off when he'd be at the back, but everyone else would slow down and he just like, his mono-pace would see him through.
Oh, no, he'd be good at that.
I'd like to see him take a goal kick after the 400 meters as well. Sorry, Fred. Not sorry.
We need to get his road cone up here. Triathlon.
Triathlon, so that'd be a back rower. Like a Chris Robshaw would be good at triathlon. Again, doesn't stop. He'd get out the water, he'd get on the bike, and everyone else is puking, and he just carries on going. Tom Wood as well.
Yeah, there's a few to be fair. Curry? Would you put Curry in
Curry,
there?
yeah.
Yeah, but he's so muscular, like maybe the swimming would be a little bit more difficult for him.
Blow out, wouldn't he?
And then the chains on the bike would snap because of his power. I think if you mini triathlon maybe because
You just need like a Trojan, you're right, Robbo.
Yeah.
Triple jump.
triple jump. I would say that pre 28 years old JJ. I want to say 28 because his Achilles is still nice and healthy. He's got a big rangy spider jump, hasn't he? He'd be good at that.
Marathon.
Marathon. Oh,
Kevin
yuck.
Sinfield, right?
Kevin, well, yes, but ultimately with him, God, a big enduro guy, Richard Wigglesworth.
Yeah.
Like he was always real fit. He still does it now. I'd back him straight off.
Engine. High jump.
High jump Johnny May. He does that for fun anyway.
Finally, the 200-metre medley.
What's a medley of what?
Swimming, sorry.
Swimming, Len. Oh, not allowed to say you. God, so you want someone with big, long shoulders, tall. I just think Fred again. Like, he's built like a swimmer, isn't he?
He is. I thought he might go like Ches or Georgie Martin.
Well, Ches's shoulder range, I reckon. I question whether he could do butterfly.
Especially post-op.
I know, poor bugger. I'd say, I bet someone random like a Tommy Freeman's really good at swimming or something like that. You know what? Actually, Jack and Slady, because of where they've come from, they're like fish. Jack Noel. Definitely. He is like a fish. I've swum with him before. He's like Aquaman.
Really?
Yeah.
Mate, for the listeners, obviously a lot of them big rugby fans and some of them are playing or amateur playing. Give a couple of basic workouts. They're fundamental for the amateur rugby player, what they need to be doing. Whether that's weight-wise or, let's say, getting in
or a quick
rugby
pre-season
conditions.
blast of rugby. Say, okay, for a back.
Yeah, just do backs.
Backs, what would you be a quick, say, like 15-minute session? Well, you know what I mean? Or like what would be a good, say, off-season run?
I don't know if this is a cop-out, but I played local rugby up until about 2 years ago. And what I see is that when it gets to the off-season, they then go into pre-season where they just do all the strongman and the fitness stuff. So then it ends up being 6 months till they touch the ball. I'd get a group of mates together and play touch rugby, honestly. Then when you go to play rugby, you've just been doing that type of thing. And then all you're doing is adding some physical elements to it. So I'd play touch rugby, I really would. You're going to use your skills. You've got stop, start, go. You've got acceleration. You're working really hard and you don't know it. If you don't have that, I'd get on a pitch and I'd do running formats that have got a change of direction to them. Ones where you have to go a little bit longer, stop, turn, and you'd be quite creative with it. And I think the ones where you're not following a formula, like I'm going to do 10 50s every 30 seconds, where you know what's coming. It's a bit unplanned and a little bit discontinuous, where your body's not quite in a routine of what you're doing. I think that's some way to prepare into the more chaotic element of when you go to play rugby. So touch initially, some discontinuous type running, where you're getting off the deck and sprinting, slowing down, speeding up. And then in the gym, I'd just do real basic fundamental stuff. Nothing that's going to harm you. You want to be strong for your body weight first. You want to be able to do 15 pull-ups. You want to be able to do 40 push-ups. Can you do a single leg squat? Can you hinge and do step-ups with good box height? Can you jump on one leg? Can you hop? Like, all those things just get brushed over way too quickly in people's development. So I would make sure you can do them. And once you've done them, then you've got time to specialise and start going for the top pocket stuff that all of the people are doing on Instagram. But until that stuff's done, I just think it's fool's gold trying to do anything more advanced.
15 chin-ups, you say?
Depending on body weight.
Cool.
With 25 kilos on top, yeah? No worries.
Yeah. Total mass.
Lewis says, what is the best thing to eat before a game for an amateur player?
I think you need your main food groups. So you need protein, you need lean protein, you need enough carbohydrate to fuel you for the game. The reality is that the meal before the game is probably, you're done then. All of your loading's done then, so you're just topping up. So I'd say the 2 days leading into the game, you're fueling with enough carbohydrate to have the energy for the game. So your carbohydrates, like your pastas, like we used to love a lasagna in camp, didn't we? Or these bespoke pastas, potatoes, rice dishes, making sure there's a good healthy portion of those in the 2 days leading up to the game. And you're not just trying to shoehorn in a big, heavy, energy-dense meal 3 hours before kickoff. Because then the reality is you don't want to be going into the game with a big, heavy stomach. So the night before, the lunchtime of the day before, they're the ones that you want to pay heed to. And they would want a mix of vegetables, carbohydrates, and lean protein.
Yeah, I agree. Because a lot of boys, it's personal preference day of a game. Some boys don't want to eat. Some boys eat heavily at breakfast, don't eat at lunch. Some boys sort of go between, depends on the bench or starting. But it's mainly, as I said before on the pod, it's the day before. It's the Thursday, Friday leading into the Saturday.
100%. It's too late otherwise.
You're eating, yeah.
We've got a question from Wayne, and actually I think it's a great question because so many people ask, like I get asked this all the time about young kids, is he big enough? Does he have to be massive? So the question is, TT, do young players coming through the ranks need to be big to make it in the modern day game?
No way. I mean, no. And for every coach that says that they do, there'll be another coach that says no, he's a good enough player. That will come. Hone skills, be athletic as you can, and weight will come. Like, depending on what stage of development they're in, some people are late developers. Some of our lads in camp, some of those lads are still growing. Like Tommy Freeman might still be growing. His brothers didn't stop growing until they're in his 20s, he was telling me. So getting obsessed with that is a risky game, because if you're still maturing and you're adding loads of weight on, then you start to get these sort of youth niggles like groins and stress responses and funny tendon issues. It's just not something you want to chase. You want to have an idea in your mind of how much weight isn't acceptable, depending on your acceleration growth rates. Just get stronger and stronger gradually over time. Weight will come. Keep being fit. Keep moving well. Keep everything healthy, and that will inevitably come. It's much better to need to put a bit of weight on when you're in your early 20s as it is to shoehorn it in and then spend your early 20s busted. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and also, like, you can get so obsessed with that stuff that you just totally forget about all the skills and all the like, you need to be good at rugby. And the other stuff, like, you can spend a pre-season in the gym and doing all that stuff to put on timber, can't you, TT?
Yeah.
But you can't spend it like trying to get better at rugby. Like, keep the main thing the main thing.
Thousands of really, really good athletes knocking around the lower leagues that have put all of their investment in their bodies and not enough in their skills. Case in point.
Great athlete though.
Yeah. Couldn't run long, but I was good for a 6-second effort.
TT, thank you so much for joining us, mate. You've been brilliant, really insightful. And I just want to say a massive thank you, mate, for all that you've done for me throughout my career.
Thank you.
And I know I speak on behalf of so many lads that you've had a huge impact on. So thank you, mate. I wish you well. And thanks for joining.
Thank you too, Len Coley.